Welcome to the Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, WWBG 1470 AM Greensboro. While it is NFL kickoff weekend, we'll get to the Shield later on in the program. We must start, though, with the storyline, really, of week one in college football was upsets and underdogs. And to join us to talk about the most important of those in our region, that would be the guy who was in Wallace Wade Outdoor Stadium Monday night. That would be Steve Wiseman of the Durham Herald Sun, Raleigh News and Observer, etc., etc. Steve, how are you?
I am good. I've recovered from my all-nighter I had to pull Monday night into Tuesday morning to get all that work done. So it's like college again. So,
and see, well, unlike Riley Leonard, you got a homework extension. He didn't.
He didn't, because his fellow linemen in that class got their homework done in time.
So, there you go.
Including the guy that
your teammate got it done. Why didn't you?
Yeah, the guy that Wes Williams blocked both the field goals in that game, and he got his homework done early. So you can have it all. You just have to plan better. That's the message.
Exactly. Time management, Riley. Time management.
Not that I was an expert at that in my college days, but anyway, that's for another.
Neither was I. That's neither here nor there. Neither of us were, and neither was your brother and my father. Anyways, yeah, he's probably yelling at the radio now, but who cares? He'll get over it. You were there. You saw it better than probably any of us. It seemed like there was this fog over Clemson all night long. I know Duke did a lot well, but what a lot of people seem to be pointing to is, Clemson had 200 yards rushing, passing, And Dabo was, we were 37-0 in games where we did that. To me, it seemed like there was just this fog where, they could sustain a drive, but once they got to the 30-yard line, it's like they ran into the Great Wall of China. They couldn't move the ball beyond that. It's like they got stuck in quicksand. The only touchdown they scored was off a muffed punt because the drive started at the 18-yard line. To me, it almost seems like there's this crack in Dabo's armor, because as good as Cade Klubnik was for 3.5 quarters of an ACC championship game, this is the first time since Tommy Bowden left that Dabo hasn't had a generational quarterback. And to me, it's kind of this crack in his armor that he doesn't have that leg to stand on now, and it's showing.
Yeah, Cade was inaccurate most of the night. He overthrew a lot of balls, and every once in a while he'd make a throw. It's like, oh, okay, that's what he's supposed to be about. But it wasn't consistent. And, Duke sacked him one time maybe. It wasn't like they were all over him all night. And Duke's defense played really well. They tackled well in the secondary. But last year, I don't want to take too much away from Duke, all right? Because Duke is better. They're a better team now. They're good, okay? They have better players. They're sturdier on defense. That's why they tackled so well. There wasn't a lot of yards after catch. Or yards after contact, there's hardly any. Because they stopped them pretty much all the time. So, but the problem with Clemson is they got down. They were first and goal on the one, didn't score a couple of times, right? Fumbles. So you can't win doing that. That's your problem. That's a you problem. That's not, Duke played really well. Duke played well. They did. But they didn't play great because they had turnovers in the first half. They had penalties, Duke did. They had mistakes. They should have been way behind at halftime. And then they came out and got that first touchdown. Riley Leonard ran it down the field, and then they got ahead, and they never gave it up. And Clemson never pushed them from that point forward. They never, they got down there and they stopped them to force a field goal, 2 blocked field goals. That's special teams mistakes. So, this wasn't all. I know his thing about they had 422 yards of offense, which is a good night, but in modern college football, that's not enough, right?
Nope.
But also, you have 13, you possess the ball 13 times, 1 touchdown. That's the problem. Right. The yards, that's all window dressing. You got to put the ball in the end zone or through the goalpost, and you didn't do it.
You got to score, period. They didn't do that. Yeah, they had some sustained drives. They may have been ahead in time of possession. You know what Duke did? They put the ball in the end zone. And you touched on this right before we started this. I don't think I've ever seen a play in the last 10 years where there hasn't been a Clemson defender that's been able to run somebody down unless it was somebody on an Ohio State or a Michigan or somebody in a college football playoff. I hadn't watched Clemson play anybody in the ACC that they weren't able to run down. The fact that Duke's quarterback boat raced all 11 guys in white and orange is concerning to me.
Big time. It should be really concerning to Clemson. And I know some of their players this week, a couple of interviews were like, hey, maybe we weren't as good a shape as we should have been. We weren't in shape for the game. Well, whose fault is that? Like, what are you talking about? You can't do that. What are you, crazy? I mean, you're playing on Monday night, like in front of 4 million, an audience of almost 4.5 million people. Like,
yeah.
What are you waiting for?
You're telling me that in front of I don't know if the official number was record crowd, but darn close to it for Wallace Wade Stadium, and nearly 5 million people tuning in on national television, and you don't have energy?
What are you waiting for?
Exactly.
I guess they're waiting for Florida State or Notre Dame. But anyway, so Riley Leonard made a great play to escape. We're talking about the 40-yard touchdown run in the third quarter on Duke's first possession that completely turned the game around. Duke took the lead and never gave it up. Okay. Barrett Carter, an all ACC linebacker for Clemson, had him corralled in the backfield for a loss on third and 3. So it should have been a punt time, right? Riley wriggled free. Okay, that happens, right? Sometimes it happens. But then that was in the backfield. So he was really like
10 other guys can't run him down from that point?
Nobody ran him down. Now, Duke had a couple of blockers ahead of him. Jordan Moore and Nicky Dalmolian did some good downfield blocking. But still, nobody on Clemson's team could catch Duke's quarterback running the ball. Now, he's faster than he's got deceptive speed because he's white, whatever. But anyway, he led him in rushing last year, okay? So let's not kid around about that. But anyway, somebody should have caught him. Like that, I'm watching this play in the press box. I'm like, wow, like nobody caught him. Like how did nobody catch him from behind? It was weird. It was a weird play.
It was a weird game, period. And again, not to take anything away from Duke, so let's shift the focus to them. Yeah, they gave up a lot of yards. Great. Okay. You look at the points against. You look at the things they were able to do offensively against a historically stout Clemson defense.
Right. All the touchdowns were rushing touchdowns. Right. Usually.
And Clemson historically has been a stuff the run defense the entire time Dabo Swinney's been there.
Dexter Lawrence, like guys like that. They don't have a guy like that now. They're supposed to, but I didn't see it on Monday night. I didn't see it. And Duke's, I looked at the PFF Pro Football Focus grades. Duke's blocking was not superior at all. I mean, they have Graham Barton at left tackle, who's going to be a first-round NFL pick. He graded out, super. But other than that, it was a lot of ordinary to bad blocking. And they did okay, but it wasn't like they were open to these super holes you could drive a truck through. And yet, Leonard had the 44-yard touchdown run. Jordan Waters had a 36-yard touchdown run. Those are big plays in the running game that a team like Duke or any team in the ACC would mostly do against a group of 5 opponent, maybe, right, or an FCS opponent,
right?
Not
a conference game.
Supposed to be not a top 10 team for sure. And that's why Clemson needs. There's alarm bells should be going off big time. I know Dabo's trying to say, nothing to see here, everything's fine, but they've got some issues that I didn't envision them having this year, but they got them.
Right. And Duke seems to be riding high off of this, and they should enjoy the heck out of it, and they certainly seem to from your vantage point Monday night. What time did you actually hit the pillow Monday night?
5 a.m. Yeah,
not too bad.
I had the game, 8 o'clock game, 8:15 start. Got over, midnight or so. Interviews, write a couple of stories, and then I'm an AP top 25 voter. So my ballot was due at 11 a.m. Tuesday because of the Monday game. It's off.
Right.
So I wanted to do that before I went to sleep, so I might, sleep through it or whatever. I don't want to miss it. So I did my ballot and then my story that explains my ballot for the News and Observer before before I went to sleep at 5:00. So yeah, and then I had to be up for like a 9:30 meeting. It was one of those days, but hey, I'm not digging ditches. I'm feeling pretty good about what I get to do here. So, but yeah, it was a long night, but yeah, it was a lot of work, and it's the good kind of work because it was a heck of a story, right? It was a great night of football, and a massive upset that obviously we talked about the TV crowd. 4.4 million people watched it. Third highest game of the weekend. Florida State, LSU was first. TCU, Colorado was second, and then the Duke Clemson game. So that's quite a stage for Duke to play really well on.
That's a big stage for the ACC also. And I think the other end of this, while Duke may be jumping up some people's boards, I think this, when you couple it with what Florida State was able to do to LSU, which was dismantle them and win by multiple scores, Clemson's not the favorite in the ACC anymore. Florida State is 100% the favorite right now.
No question about it. Now, North Carolina played really well in beating South Carolina. That was a big win for the ACC too. But yeah, I was one of those, and we may have talked about it on here. When I did my preseason ballot to pick the ACC the order of finish for the league, I picked Clemson first and Florida State second and North Carolina third. But when I did my ballot for the AP, I had Clemson ahead. I had Florida State ahead of Clemson for now. And I thought by the end of the year, Clemson would be the better team. That's how I justified all that. Now, after seeing both teams play, I have a different opinion, right? That's right. That's what we do here. Once the season starts.
And when you look at the caliber of opponent, not that Duke is a slouch and it was a conference game, but I mean, for goodness sakes, Florida State beat the brakes off of LSU.
Right. Mighty.
Another
LSU
top 10 team.
Mighty SEC. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe, again, as it goes on, maybe that win will it age well or will it age poorly? We'll see. That's how this goes. But I mean, LSU with the talent and the coaching and all that, they should be, even if that loss,
they'll be fine.
They're going to be a top 15 team probably in the year. I'll be shocked if they're not. But sometimes that happens, right? Texas A&M last year was an example of that, right? So we'll see how it plays out.
Not going to say that right now, my alma mater broke them or anything, but
yeah. But Florida State really put on a show, and they looked like a really good team. And I moved them up to fourth in my ballot this week. I was in concurrence with the rest of the country on the voting there. I think I had them at like 12th the week before coming out preseason. So they earned it. They played really well on that stage. 9 million people watched that one.
So let's move it to the final point of our conversation, which is going to be the AP ballot. There's a ton of shakeup there. When you look at how far Clemson dropped, Duke moves into the top 25, and then, oh, surprise, Colorado's ranked. Did you vote for them?
I did vote for Colorado, only 24th.
Okay, see, that's where I would have had them, but
yeah, they've got some more proving to do in my eyes. That was a great win on the road. TCU was 17th in the preseason poll. On my ballot, they were 24th. So I just kind of flipped them out, put Colorado in there. So I was impressed by Colorado, but I wasn't as impressed as people who had TCU, higher in the poll, right, in their ballot.
Right.
Colorado gave it 42 points. They've got some work to do on defense, right? You can win that way, but it's hard. So they were just. It's fine. They listen. They're going to beat Nebraska, I'm sure, certain this weekend, because Nebraska's horrible, and
right.
And then we'll see. I'll keep moving them up as long as they keep winning, but they've got to really take a jump. They've got to beat somebody, that's really, really good. So
they're going to have to beat somebody in the Notre Dame game. To me, for them, is the one that I'm circling as to, are they going to be a legit top 15, top 10 team? They got to play Notre Dame at the end of this month before we can start saying that, at least in my mind.
Oh, with Duke, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I put Duke in. They were 21st. I had them a little higher because of who they beat. They beat Clemson, right? So they beat a top 10 team. I put them in. I think I had them 17th. So they ended up 21st. That's good. That's a good place for them to be. They earned their way in. I did not have Clemson on my ballot this week. They stuck around at 25th. That's fine. I got no problem with that. But in my eyes, they've got to earn their way back into the poll. Clemson does. And they'll get a shot in a couple weeks when they play Florida State. But as of right now, what I saw Monday night was not a top 25 team.
And that game, in a lot of ways, was Clemson simply did not execute. Duke executed. Whether it be at the, you talked about the blocking grades, they made the plays they had to make. Clemson didn't. Sometimes that's all it takes. Clemson didn't put the ball in the end zone. Let's shift it back to Colorado and kind of the national landscape for a moment. To me, it's also very funny. We're going to talk about this with Desmond Johnson in a second when he comes on to talk about the Panthers. It's so funny that this full circle moment of, okay, Frank Reich was the first starting quarterback in the history of the Carolina Panthers. Dom Capers was the first head coach. They're both back as coaches. With Dom Capers as more of a consultant. But their first game altogether in 95 was against Atlanta. They're playing Atlanta on Sunday. Who is historically the greatest Atlanta Falcon of all time? Deion Sanders. Who's he playing Saturday? Oh, yeah, the guy that was just excommunicated from being head coach of the Carolina Panthers. He's now at Nebraska. You can't make this stuff up. It's fantastic. And you talked about ratings. That was the most watched noon game on that big noon set Fox has ever had. Ever.
Yes.
Colorado has this allure to them.
It was Deion. It was a great game. That helped too, right? I mean, and TCU coming off the championship game appearance, was a good audience. I had it on. Luckily, Duke played Monday night, so I was able to sit on Saturday and flip around games. And I had my TV on that one quite a bit because it was like a tennis match, man. You're going back and forth.
Right. So, it was hard to look away from.
Right. That's right. So, again, I didn't have Colorado as high as other people did. Deion wants to call me out. Call me out, baby. I'll talk to you about it. It's fine.
I'm sure he's got the receipts too.
He seems to.
I'm sure he held on to those too. One more thing. The craziest part to me about Colorado and the 80 some odd new players is that two of the most important ones on the field, the two that made the biggest impact. First of all, one of them obviously got had some kind of an IV of pickle juice or something. Travis Hunter played 120 snaps in Fort Worth, Texas, when it's 125 degrees on the field. That's it, and to put on the performance he did, that's something. Shooter Sanders throwing for 500 plus yards and 4 touchdowns. Think about the fact that both of those guys, plus 7 others that played, would have been in an FCS school had they not followed Deion to Colorado. And they go out and do this against the defending national runner-up. That's a scary thought.
No, it's good. And they have players. They have good players, really good players. Guys that make big plays. What we just were talking about, Clemson doesn't seem to have this year, right? And on Monday night they didn't have them. But Colorado showed us they do. So they've got a nice runway to go up here. They're gonna be pretty good this year, I think. He totally remade the roster. So the fact they were a 1-win program last year really has nothing to do with it. It's like he totally, tore that down and built it back up again.
Right. You had 3 teams that were 1-11 last year. You have, of course, Colorado. You have Texas State, who beat Baylor. First power conference team they've beaten since they moved up to FBS in 2012. And then South Florida, who hires Tennessee's offensive coordinator and is 3 or 4 bad plays away from beating a Western Kentucky team that had like the 5th best offense in the country last year and brought almost everyone back. So that shows you the impact of the portal. One more thing before I let you go. You got Carolina and App State this weekend. We saw the statement Carolina made against South Carolina. Basically took up permanent residency in the Gamecocks backfield. Seemed like every time Spencer Rattler dropped back, there were 3 powder blue clad defenders in his face. This being Carolina's home opener, coming off of that neutral site game, App State didn't really have a tremendous showing against an FCS opponent. The guy they thought was going to be the starter is hurt now. Aguilar comes in. He's the guy. To me, and a lot of App State fans are kind of thinking, oh, it's just going to be like last time. We're going to roll in there. We're just going to go punch for punch with them. This is not only a different Carolina team than was in 2019. This is a different App State team than was in 2019. As much as I want App State to win this football game, I'm having to temper my own expectations.
Yeah, I mean, 2019 was Mac Brown's first year, and that game was in September, if I remember right. So it was one
Yep.
of his first games back with the program, and he'd taken over, a mess that Larry Fedora had left behind. So, yeah, totally different place. Uh, Normally, App State is a pretty good offensive line. They're usually a pretty good blocking team throughout history. So South Carolina was not. They have offensive line trouble. They thought they were
Right.
going to have offensive line trouble, and it really showed up. North Carolina had 17 sacks all of last season. They had 9 against South Carolina. So there's some issues there. I don't think they're going to sack. They're going to have 9 sacks against App. Okay, but
No.
they may not need to. I mean, I still think they've got some athletes there. They seem to be a different group than they were last year when they give up 61 points or 40 points in the fourth quarter up on the mountaintop. That was amazing. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this will be a competitive game, and who knows? Maybe we'll see that if App State can block North Carolina's front, then we'll really see how poor South Carolina's offensive line. It's only 1 week we have to go on now, so we're going to see how this builds.
Right.
So I think North Carolina's a double-digit favorite, probably a couple touchdowns, maybe 12 points. That's probably about right, but upsets can happen.
Clemson was also a 12.5-point favorite going in, and everybody I talked to before that game was like, "Oh, that went by 2 touchdowns. Yeah, hammer that." Yeah, look what happened.
They don't call it. They call it gambling. They don't call it sure thinging.
There you go. Seems like Scott Van Pelt should use that one.
I have to give props to my good friend Charlie Bennett down in South Carolina came up with that one, so I have to give him full credit for that one.
Well, thanks, Charlie. We do appreciate the catchphrase that we're now going to trademark and give you partial royalties on. Steve, we got to get out of here so we can talk to Des, but thanks so much for coming on, my friend. We'll have you on next week, as always.
All right, glad to be on. Take care.
Let's roar into week 1 with the Panthers after this. Back here on The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com, 1470 WWBG AM Greensboro. Joining the program to help us kick off NFL kickoff weekend, it's Desmond Johnson, host of the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast, among a host of other Carolina Panthers-related content. And Des thus begins this weekend the quest for the NFC South crown. It all begins for Bryce Young this weekend. Aside from the firsts for him, what's one of the biggest things you're looking for in this regular season opener out of this Panthers team?
I think right now the main thing for us is what offense are we running? Because we don't really know. They went completely vanilla. I know teams say it all the time that we're pretty vanilla in our play calling in the preseason. The Panthers meant it when they said it. They said it week 1 of the preseason. We're going to be very vanilla. We're not going to show Atlanta anything that we're going to run out of our playbook. And that's what they literally did. So we don't really know exactly what kind of offense the Panthers are going to roll out. We can go back and look at previous Frank Wright stops and places where he was offensive. Of course, he was offensive coordinator for the Eagles in 2017 that won the Super Bowl. Of course, he was the head coach with Indy for 4 years, right at the tail end of Andrew Luck. So we kind of got an idea. We know he likes to run the football. We know he uses 2 tight end sets a lot. He loves the tight end in his offense. And I would expect a lot of that because they kept 5 tight ends on the 53-man roster. So there'll probably be a lot of 2 tight end sets. Panther fans aren't used to seeing that. Probably haven't done that since we had Greg Olsen and oh my gosh, what was his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. He played for the Giants.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Jeremy Shockey. Jeremy Shockey.
Yeah, that first couple years of Ron Rivera, which was a pretty fun offense to run. So probably looking to see what the offense is going to do. And I'm not as worried about the offensive line as a lot of people in the media and fans have really hammered home, because really was a national media pulling 4 plays out of 3 games that looked bad if you pull those 4 out to look at them. And 3 of those plays involved Ike Ekwonu. And it's like they're kind of nitpicking at it a little bit. They're not even running plays. The defense they're going against are doing stunts and things like this to get back there. I would pump the brakes a little bit on being worried about the offensive line. But that's the main thing. I want to see what they're going to do offensively. I don't want them to be scoring, 12 points a game. That's not going to cut it in the NFL. And I don't think they will. I think they've got enough to be competitive in this NFC South in 2023.
Yeah, you said it right there. I agree with you. The big thing I'm looking for is not only can this offense score, but can they score as often as we expect them to with the weapons that they have now? When you look at, all right, they've been a quarterback away the whole time. You got the quarterback now. You bring in Miles Sanders to kind of stabilize the run game once again. He's also a great pass catcher out of the backfield. You talk about the tight end position with Hurst. You've got Adam Thielen as a reliable veteran target. The offensive line seems to be shored up. So for me, it's not just can you score, it's can you score often, and how many different ways can you score? How many different ways can you get Miles Sanders involved in the passing game? Can you get Laviska Shenault maybe involved in the running game? Yeah. How do you utilize both tight ends? Is Hayden Hurst a deep threat? Is he a 10, 12-yard, chunk play in between the hash marks in route kind of guy? Who do you use as the power back here? Do you use Bryce Young in a running role more than you maybe thought you would have? And how much do you open up the playbook? How creative do you get if you're Frank Reich is what I'm really going to be in tune to, is how many different ways can all these names we've been talking about for months be utilized to put a large number, crooked number of points on the board?
Yeah, I mean, my main concern is the wide receiver room in terms of not the names in there, but who's going to be available Sunday, because there's a lot of injuries, little nagging injuries. DJ Chark's dealing with a hamstring. Laviska was in concussion protocol, but if I'm not mistaken, he was a full participant, or he was not on the injury reserve or the injury list on Wednesday. So I'm pretty sure he'll be available. The kid they picked up from Kansas City, I think he's dealing with an ankle or something like that, but he was a full participant in practice on Wednesday as well. Adam Thielen's dealing with an injury, a little nagging thing. I think it's his ankles also. I'm curious to see who's going to be the 1, the 2, and the 3 at wide receiver, because I'd imagine it'll be some kind of combo of Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, and DJ Chark when he's out there. If he's not out there, the kid from Kansas City is probably going to get some reps. I can see Shenault out there. But that was one of my things I'd mentioned on the Bleav in Panthers podcast that I wanted to see. Who is going to emerge as Bryce's favorite target? Not necessarily the number 1 in the wide receiver room, but who's the guy that Bryce is going to look at? Who is his Travis Kelce? Like, who's the guy?
Who's his go-to?
Yeah, when he's getting chased by 3 huge, beefy men in the backfield and he's running around, he's got to get that ball out. Who's going to be the guy he looks at? And I'm hoping it's Jonathan Mingo, so they can kind of build that chemistry from the very beginning. I won't be mad if it's somebody like Adam Thielen, because he's the grizzled vet of that room. So I just want to see how it starts to develop. I'm just ready to get into Panther football again. It got to a point, some of the games last year, where it felt like a chore kind of watching it, because, I have to do a billion podcasts on it and talk about it and everything else. So you got to get through the game. And sometimes those games, for me personally, I can always tell when I'm going to enjoy a Panther game because I'm in it from the first drive. Like, I'm yelling at the TV. I'm engaged with it. I'm not really on my phone on Twitter or anything. I'm just in the game watching it from the very beginning. It's the ones where they start out real slow and I can't catch you're a Packer fan. Like, when you're watching the Packers, some days they just don't have it. You know what I mean? Like, you're trying to get
exactly.
To the game,
yeah.
You just can't get into it. And you start sitting there and you're like, man, I'm not feeling this game today. It's like second quarter. And like, you're just something about it. And there was more of those than not during the Matt Rule regime. Not so much with Steve Wilkes. It became fun again, but I'm ready for a new regime, new page, new faces all over the place. This is a brand new thing here in Charlotte. We've got the number 1 pick in the draft. We went up to go get him. It's unusual for Carolina to be this aggressive. So I want to see what this amounts to on the playing field, because we've done all the other stuff that if you were building a team from scratch, we've pretty much went down the checklist of things you want to do. Get your quarterback, go get a number 1 pick, solidify your offensive line, build the best coaching staff money can buy, fill in the gaps in free agency, make good picks. They've done everything you would want to do. They did the due diligence at number 1. I think Bryce Young is the number 1 pick. When you look at the other quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson's going to be up and down. CJ Stroud is in a bad situation in Houston, where he's not going to get a lot of help at all. So that's going to probably reflect his play. And I was never high on Will Levis to begin with. And he wasn't even drafted in the first round. So Bryce, it feels like they made the best choice there. Now it's time to put them on the field and see what this amounts to from this offseason of work that started way back in March of 2023.
Nail on the head. From a team building perspective, you have checked every single box. The only thing that is left to determine now is how all these pieces fit into the puzzle and how all these pieces play together in a game that counts against a divisional opponent. I know we talked about Atlanta may not being a threat, not maybe being a formidable opponent, but just like any other divisional game in NFL history, Atlanta is going to try and knock your socks off because it's a divisional game, and this is a historically geographic rivalry. It's not like Atlanta's just going to, sit down and roll over for this.
No. I mean, the last time we went to Atlanta last year was the game where PJ Walker threw a 60-yard bomb in the air to DJ Moore, who caught it for a touchdown. His time was about to expire, and then DJ Moore got the penalty for taking his helmet off the field. He was off the field already. He took his helmet off, was celebrating. They called him for that. They pushed the extra point back like 15 yards. We missed the extra point, had to go to overtime, missed that field goal in overtime as well. The Falcons ended up winning the game, in a game where we would have ended up winning if we kicked it from the 10 or whatever it normally is for the extra point. So there's history between these two teams. Head coach Frank Wright, who was the first starting quarterback in Carolina Panthers franchise history, his first game was against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. Dom Capers is on this staff as a defensive, we call them gurus, him and Jim Caldwell. They're not officially coaches, but they're like advisors. Like Caldwell's on the offense. Capers
They're
is on
consultants.
They're consultants. Dom Capers was the first head coach in Carolina Panthers history. He was standing right beside Frank Wright on the sideline. That photo of Frank Wright and Dom Capers and Sam Mills, where he's got the big neck brace on and the big pads or whatever. That's from that first game at Atlanta. There's a lot here, and they've been looking forward to this. They have talked about this on Camp Confidential and other Panther items where they've talked about how it's come back full circle that Frank Wright is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Dom Capers is back in Charlotte. And lo and behold, their first game together in these positions is against Atlanta at Atlanta to open the 2023 regular season. And you can't really write it up better than that. So they'll be hype and ready to go. The question is, are the players going to feed off that too?
It's definitely in the category of stuff you can't make up. And if the players don't feed off of it, I don't know what the conversation's like in that locker room where you don't kind of feed off that. To me, there's this energy of newness, for lack of better phrasing. There's this energy of a turning of the page with this franchise. All these guys get to write their own story. The past of the Matt Rule era and all the shenanigans and all that is gone. The page is turned. The pen is in their hands. It's their turn to write their own story. And I think this roster is very talented and has what it takes to take that story and run with it.
It kind of reminds me of when Ron Rivera first got here. Kind of same situation. They had the number one pick in the draft. They draft Cam Newton, new face of the franchise. It was turning the page from the John Fox era, which kind of bottomed out. The difference here is that Carolina wasn't the worst team in the league last year. Like, I think a lot of the national media thinks that they were the worst because they had the number one pick, but they're forgetting we traded with Chicago. We had the 9th pick. We almost won the NFC South last year in spite of ourselves. We fired the coach after week 6. We trade off our best player. We trade off our best wide receiver. We completely abandoned the offensive game plan and decided to run the ball 40 times. Like we did so many things last year, injuries, where we should have had no business even being contending for the NFC South last year with everything that happened, yet they were. And the core of that team is returned. And they've added pieces around it. And they finally settled the quarterback position, because that was really the reason why they lost the division last year, between Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, PJ Walker. None of those guys. Well, Baker's going to be starting in Tampa, but I think that's by design. I think they're trying to get Caleb Williams, but that's a whole different conversation to begin with.
Well, remember, if Caleb Williams doesn't like Tampa Bay, he can stay.
I mean, the money would be comparable with NIL. He probably could stay another year. I don't think he will, but that's what I would do if I'm Caleb Williams in Arizona or Tampa drafts me. I don't want to go there. Do the Peyton Manning, or not the Peyton Manning. Do the Eli Manning. Do the John Elway.
Yeah,
man, a trade after you know where you're going, because there's no whoever. If you're that good, you're going to go to a team that sucks. Like when you do right. So even if you don't go this year, it'll just be some other team that sucks the next year that they're going to be picking you. So why are you waiting a year and risking injury? Just go, go ahead and get your money. Williams had like a Pat Mahomes throw, like jumping out of bounds last week too. So he's legit, but of course, all college football is talking about Colorado and Dion and all that. And of course, we've got Colorado taking on Matt Rule and
Nebraska
Saturday, big Saturday on Fox. And now I'm a casual football plan, and I've already planned my Saturday around that Colorado game. So I just told Dimitri Ravanos this just a minute ago. I haven't felt a buzz like this outside for a college football team since 04-05 USC. We're like casual fans talking about college football, and they're talking about that team in particular and players on it in particular. It's been like since Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and those boys were running around, where you could go into a bar and it would just be packed with people watching USC just because they heard that USC is really good. They're the rock star team, and Colorado has a chance to do that. And I'm curious to see if they can. So interesting. I know I just went off on a tangent, but I really like the
I'm so glad you did, because it's something that I wanted to talk about is parity with college football. You've got, it's not like people walk into a bar and want to see an Alabama or a Georgia or a Notre Dame or a Clemson. They're tired of seeing those teams. They want to see a successful Colorado. To me, you said it right there. It reminds me of that 04-05 USC. It reminds me of those Florida teams that have now been put in a documentary. Reminds me of those mid-2000s Michigan, Ohio State games.
I'd even throw early 2000 Miami, like that those games. And I'm not saying before like the score fans like jump on me. I'm not saying that Colorado's as good as 2001. I'm not saying they're as good as 04-05 USC.
Look, if this Colorado-Nebraska game happened last week, Colorado may be a dog. They might not be favored in this game if it's week one, but knowing what we know now, that's where we are. But you talk about things coming full circle. There's nothing that could come more full circle than arguably one of the greatest players in Atlanta Falcons franchise history, Deion Sanders, coaching against the guy who was excommunicated from the team that Atlanta is playing the next day. And you said it. This Colorado team, I want to watch them every time they're on. Not because I like Colorado, but just because they're entertaining to watch.
Yes, exactly. That's my whole thing. Like I tried to leave the house. Like it was on. It just started, and you guys know sometimes I'll go and like do something on Saturdays and do some work, and I had to leave. So I was like, it's Colorado. How good can they be? They were 1-11 last year. Not only were they the worst team in college football last year, but they were like one of the worst college football teams of all time last year. So I'm like,
statistically speaking, yeah.
So I left, and about halfway through the time I was gone, I have Sirius XM in my car. I was like, you know what? There's something telling me to flip back to this Colorado game just to see what's going on. And I couldn't find it at first. I finally found it on Mad Dog Sports, and it was the TCU call. And the announcers they'd be up because TCU would score, then it'd be down because Shadur Sanders or Travis Hunter or somebody did something, or it's like touchdown Colorado. And like it just kept going back and forth over and over. And when the announcer said, and with that pass, Shadur Sanders crosses 500 yards passing on the day, I was just like, what is going on? Like
you kind of did a double take. Like, wait a minute, can you read that again?
I literally flipped over to it right when Travis Hunter had that interception at the goal line, where he like stretched out and got it or whatever. And Dion was like, he's him. Like, yeah, he's him. Like if you could play 100 snaps in college football in a single game in 100-degree weather and perform like that
in Texas, where it's not only is it 100 degrees, it is humid.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he and Shadur both firmly put themselves in the Heisman race in week one. That's tremendous. Now, the question is, can they follow it up? But can they follow it up with another performance? Because if they follow it up with something with Nebraska and win that game or win big with Nebraska, Colorado's going to be in the top 10 next week. Like, they're going to leapfrog up all the way, because they're already 17 now, and they weren't even ranked before. They're going to put them in the top 10, and they're going to see where this goes, and Fox is going to start playing Colorado games, because I don't think they even have any more on the schedule after this Saturday. So
this is it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the ratings from that game, I was guilty of it getting ready for my Saturday broadcast with Learfield. I was just, had the TV on in the studio and just getting ready to go, and just you couldn't look away from that game.
That's what made me.
You couldn't look away from it. They're just so entertaining to watch. And Fox, the numbers prove that. That was the most watched noon game on Fox ever.
I don't doubt it.
Ever.
Prime brings that, man. And that's what reminded me of USC. USC was playing, it was the 04 season, 05 Rose Bowl, where they ended up losing to Texas. But they were losing, I want to say it was to Arizona State or somebody, real late on a Saturday night. Me and my buddies, we're in college, and we're at a bar in downtown Greensboro. and I'm the only one sitting at the bar, like I'm rooting for USC, and they got down like 28-7 or something going into the half, and everyone's like clowning, like, oh, it's over for USC. I'm like, no, watch. And they come out, and the first offensive possession is the one where Reggie Bush is running down the sideline, and he does the thing where he goes behind his back, like while he's running, like a basketball pass or whatever, and goes.
I remember.
I think it was like a punt return or something, and it was on from there. And like they just went boom, 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 down, and before you knew it, they won 42-28 or whatever. But the buzz in the bar, there were guys and girls just surrounding all of a sudden where I was sitting at the bar to watch it that weren't college football fans. Like they were attracted to the excitement, and that's what I'm comparing Colorado to. They've got a thing going on over there, sparked by Prime, that's just excitement in college football that I haven't seen in a while. And I thought it was starting to get snuffed out with all the expansion and everything else going on. Colorado, man, they might be the story of the year. Now, all this is for nothing if they lose on Saturday. So they got to go out and win.
No pressure, Dion. Make sure to hang on to those receipts.
He loves pressure, though. He's built off of that.
Oh, yeah. He embraces it.
There that loves it. It's him. So, yeah, I'm not worried about him or his team.
Very quickly, give me some defensive keys real quick here for Carolina here on Sunday.
Brian Burns needs to be on the field. That's 1, 2, and 3. He without him, there is no pass rush for the Panthers for the most part, especially with Marquise Haynes going on injured reserve earlier in the week. Justin Houston's more of a situation player now at this point of his career. But I will say the linebacking core for Carolina, I consider their strength. It's Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, Frankie Louvu, Justin Houston. That's a pretty good core to start off with at linebacker for Carolina. And I think they're going to be the spine of this team. So depending on how they go, we'll see how the defense goes with the Panthers. They were the number 2 overall defense just 2 years ago in terms of yards allowed. So the talent is there. Will they be able to take advantage of that? We'll find out.
Pretty sure every TV from here all the way down to Georgia, maybe up into Virginia and down into Florida is going to be, the entire East Coast might even be tuned into this game just because of the intrigue. Des, thanks so much, and keep pounding, my friend.
Appreciate you, man.